Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Today's topic is an integral part of the use of English, and the topic is appreciating literature in English. The keyword here is literature in English. What is the meaning of literature? Before we the uh, delve into talking about the literature in English. The meaning of the word literature is often associated with a piece of written works. This association is not only misleading but also limits the central meaning of the term literature. For instance, associating literature with a piece of written works has excluded oral literature, which is a literary culture that had existed many years before the invention of machines, writing machines or printers. You see, besides, such associations expand the scope of literature beyond the expected limits by including writings of other fields, such as advertising, law, medicine, engineering, technology, science, history, and what have you. When we look at literature as a piece of writing, we have included so many unnecessary aspects, making it look as if it encompasses all fields. Yes, literature is felt in every field of human endeavor. We have it in science, so we call it science literature. We have it in history, we have it in economics, the literature of economics, technology, geography, biology, medicine. All of these fields have documentation that represent what they do as professionals. Therefore, we can talk about their literature as a form of discipline because it involves the use of specialized form of language, both in written and oral form, just to discuss creatively the conditions of human life in the society. But that's not the area, that's not the kind of literature we are talking about. The literature we are focusing on is the kind of literature written in English language. And this literature does not mean it is written in English simply because it aligns with the culture of English speaking people. It reflects the philosophies of English speaking people, whether native speakers or non-native speakers. So their cultures, their values, their philosophies, their perceptions are documented in the English language. Therefore, it is called literature in English. Fine, we want to argue that the one in science, the one in the media industry, the literature in the field of economics, are they not also documented in English? Yes, they are also documented in English, but there are peculiarities or characteristics that inherit literature in English as a discipline, as an independent discipline, unlike a subsidiary or an auxiliary in another field. Secondly, literature is one and the same globally. It is a tool used to portray the theme of love, hatred, corruption, ambition, fear, greed, triumph, failure, divisiveness, betrayal, rejection that characterize the lives of human beings. The only point of divergence lies in the geographical space or physical context in which the writer is situated. For instance, Writers that are situated, that are born and bred and trained in America would write what we call the American literature. Writers that are born, bred, and trained in Africa would write what we call African literature. The same way we have those in Asian literature and European literature. So I'm talking from a general perspective here, looking at the literature in English based on different contexts. So a writer's choice of theme, plot structure and setting and use of language or stylistic content differs from one writer to another. But the bottom line is that literature in English is used to portray the theme of love, corruption, ambitions, things that plague our world today, that makes our world unlivable and in turmoil. And the essence of this literature is to enlarge our experiences, to expose us to what is happening in other continents far away from us. When you pick up a copy of literature in English written by an American author, there are peculiarities or use of expressions that are not similar to that of literature written by African authors. Why? Because they represent different continents, different culture, different perception, and different philosophies. We try to which they try to portray based on their life experiences living in such space or spaces. Now, this literary text relates with the literary artist's actual life experiences. So what these writers do is to express their socio-political experiences, portray what the social realities are, the political instabilities, the economic hardship in the space in which they are writing. Now, I need you to understand something. Now, somebody defines literature as a liberating force, freeing us from the inherent shackles placed upon us by the society. A liberating force, freeing us, setting us free from the inherent shackles placed upon us by the society. That is the primary goal of literature in English. That is the primary goal of literary artists, wherever they are across the world. Now, we have talked about literature in English in written form. However, literature had existed in Africa even before the invention of printing press. Written literature came into existence when there was the machine that can produce write-ups. But before then, there had existed what we call oral literature. So it is erroneous to believe that it's the white man that brought literature to us as Africans. No. We had our own literature, we had our own ways of life, we had our own values as Africans before the incursion of the Western world, before the invasion of the colonial imperialists. So this oral literature, this literature that existed before the presence of the Western people, before the Europeans set their feet on the African soil, is what is known as oral literature. So oral literature consists of manners, customs, beliefs, superstitions, proverbs, chants, war songs, recitations, taboos, stories, child drama, praise name, especially of royalty that had existed before the advent of colonialism. Of course, some of us that grew up in the village in the 70s, in the 80s, in the 60s, we understand what we call stories. Stories of how they taught it, stories of animals, just to pass moral lessons to young generations. We also had in our various localities what we call child drama, where we have a group of children coming to play some roles as actors and actresses. Not something serious, but just to pass messages of morality and rectitude and chastity in the society. So all of this, so before the arrival of Europeans on African soil, African oral traditions were inspired and based on our cosmology as Africans. So the reason is that Africans believe passionately in supreme being. So oftentimes, what we try to portray in oral literature is that there is a supreme being that is higher than every other person. And there are dictates and there are dictates and way and expectations of this supreme being that we as human beings of the lower beings should abide by if things must go right. Now, in between this supreme being and we human beings, in the middle level are what we call deities, oracles, and gods. Because it is part of the African cosmology to believe that we cannot consult God directly. So there is an intermediary known as deities, oracles, or with their priests who will communicate the messages from the gods to us. Especially when there is famine in the land, we consult oracles, we consult or the drought or famine or diseases or epidemics in the community or in the villages. It is often attributed to something terrible done by somebody. Why? Because the goal of these beliefs is to ensure that the society is safe for peaceful habitation, the society is sanctified, and the society is characterized by communal life or communal living. So our oral literature had existed, there were so many gods, supreme beings in different African communities. Let's take the Nigerian context, for example. The Yorubas call their supreme being Olodumare, while the Igbo call it Chukwu. Okay, whereas between this Olodumare and Chukwu and us human beings, there are some deities and oracles, okay, that had existed. We have them, Sango, Ogun. These are lesser gods, Obatala, Orunmila. And in the land of Yoruba, in Igbo land, we have what we call Anyanwu and Onwa. Anyanwu is the god of sun, Onwa is the god of moon, Allah, the earth god, Ikenga, and the rest of them in the Igbo land. So all of this showed that we had our beliefs, we had our ways of life before the white man stepped their feet on the African soil. So we had our own. The only difference is that those superstitions, those beliefs, those proverbs, chants, war songs, all these perceptions were not documented. So they became documented when the Western world, when the Europeans came to the soil of Africa and introduced education to us as Africans. So all of these had existed before colonialism. So the coming of colonialism brought Western culture and traditions. Now these Europeans try in their own way to modify and unbundle the African traditional institutions that had existed before they arrived. So they tried sometimes they tried to displace our cultural heritage or psychological disposition. For example, some European writers had a shallow knowledge of pre-colonial African traditional institutions. So they just refer to us as a savage people or a people of a dark continent. Because what we do, and that's according to Stanley Henry. Then Joseph Conrad also misrepresented Africa as the heart of darkness in his novel Heart of Darkness. We have so many other people too who try to misrepresent what we believed in before they came, and they try to make it look as if whatever African belief is not the best. In fact, Richard Francis Burton claimed that there was no thing like African culture. So these are ways by which these Europeans, these Eurocentric writers misrepresented Africans based on what they heard from staying not understand. Instead of them to admit their lack of knowledge of what the African context is all about, they end up what misrepresenting what African culture or disparaging what African culture is. However, whether they believe it or not, whether they accepted it or not, there are elements of oral literature in Africa, such as myths, legends, folklores, riddles and jokes, storytelling, dance drama, and so on, love songs, moonlight tales. Even I grew up to hear about moonlight tales. So folk songs expressed in prosaic forms. So some of these dramatic and theatrical displays in oral narrative forms had existed in many years before these Europeans came to Africa. So when they came, they brought education, and most African children then keyed into this education, grew up to understand the ways of the white man, but did not imbibe what the white man did not accept the misrepresentations of Africans by these white writers. So they came up with their own writers, and foremost among these educated African writers that tried to change the narrative from what the earliest European writers represented Africans as to the what we are as human beings, as a culture, included Amos Tutuola, Chinua Achebe, Akole Soyinka, Symphony Quincy, Olawotimi, T.M. Aluko, Elisha Amadi, J.P. Clark, Gabriel Okara, Beno Kri, Busheme Chita, Flora Nwapa, Ngugi wa Thiong'o, Ayinkwe Ama of Ghana, Miramba and Sembene Usman of Senegal, and Ngugi wa Thiong'o in Kenya. So these people, Amina former, that's Sierra Leone, Nadine in South Africa. These were African writers trained by Europeans, trained on the European soil, but they did not lose touch with their African culture. What they end up, so they tried to portray the Africans in the positive light, displacing the negative narrative by the earliest European Eurocentric writers. Now, what are the functions of literature? Now, when we talk about literature, how does it affect you as a student, as a professional, or in whatever field you are? As a student of banking, mass communication, economics, geography, biology, sciences, technology, what has that got to do with me as a student of management or engineering or technology or sciences or social sciences? Number one, literature educates you by exposing you to the stark realities about socio-political experiences and unimaginable living conditions of human beings. With the help of literature, we get to know what other people's life experiences are. For example, when you pick up a copy of works written by American writers, you don't need to travel to America for you to have an understanding of their values, of their beliefs, of their culture. Another function, number two function, is it awakens our reasoning faculty. By having a knowledge of what other people are going through or what other people's values are, when you have an encounter with an American now, your knowledge of reading literature helps you to be able to adjust your communication style or have an understanding of from where the person is and the American is speaking from. If you are the type that loves reading works written by Europeans, that kind of literature is different from that of Americans, because the American culture is not the same as that of European culture. They may look alike, they are not the same. So it awakens your reasoning faculty. Even within your own local community, you get to know about what writers from the north talk about experiences in the north. Writers from the southwestern part of the country talk about the experiences of and the values of southwest people. And those who are from the north talk about their experiences. Even when we talk about female writers, they talk about the experiences of female of womanhood anywhere. So they try to represent the experiences of women in their literature. Talk about gender inequality, talk about breaking the ceiling, talk about how women can explore how women can be creative and set themselves free from a patriarchal system that has been existed for centuries. So all of this is to help you awaken your reasoning faculty, so that when you're talking to a woman, or when a woman is speaking, because you have read a literature written by a feminist, you now have an understanding of what, from which perspective she is speaking from. Another function of literature is that it impacts didactic lessons about morality and precautions. Every society is run based on checks and balances, where of course there should be carrots, and the principle of carrots and cane. The principle of carrots and cane means that there should be reward for good deeds, and there should be punishment for bad deeds. So literature tries to help you understand that when you are greedy, there are consequences. When you are of good intentions and of good deeds, there are also consequences. So what literature tries to do is to impact didactic lessons, so that it gives you instructions or advises you about conduct that are morally acceptable and standard in a society. So, and in a way, it discourages acts of deviation or vices in the society. So this helps us to shape our personality, our engender social reformation. Then number 4, literature serves as an avenue for entertainment and pleasure. I'm sure if you have read a comedy, okay, it's meant to make you just laugh. Or you have read a work about love story, okay, so you will begin to feel, if you begin to see yourself laughing or enjoying that work because of the pleasure you derive from reading it. So these are the 4 functions of literature. Number 1 is that it educates us as individuals. Number 2, it awakens our reasoning faculties. Number 3, it impacts didactic lessons to us, and it serves as an avenue for entertainment and pleasure to us. It is also a way of preserving our culture and preserving our cultural heritage. You get to learn from Chinua Achebe's book, Things Fall Apart, okay, An Arrow of God. You get to learn about the ways of the Igbo people without living among them. You get to understand when they speak, when they behave. You begin to see elements of what Achebe has discussed in his literature. When you read Olawetimi's work, you get to understand how the Yoruba reason, how they behave, why are they speaking, from which perspective are they speaking from. Why? Because it helps you, because these people represent the cultural heritage of their own people, as Yoruba or as Igbo. So literature helps us to preserve and promote our cultural heritage. Now, what are the genres of literature? Now, what is a genre? Let's start with that. A genre is a French word that translates to mean kind of or type of. It helps readers to know where a piece of literary work is situated. A genre refers to any particular literary work that shares certain similarities. So with a genre, you can associate a particular work based on certain similarities that are found in them. And there are 3 genres, and there are 3 classifications or kinds of literature. We have what we call drama, prose, and poetry. So all of these help you to situate. When you are reading a literature, you can now know that, okay, I'm reading a prose, this one I'm reading a drama piece, or I'm reading a poem. Now, let us look at some of the similarities of all the genres of literature, whether prose, poetry, or drama. Number 1 is that all genres of literature have a central theme. All genres of literature have a central theme. A literature does not exist in isolation. There is always a message to be passed across. So every work of literature has a theme. It could be the theme of love, it could be the theme of frustration, it could be the theme of betrayal or greed, it could be the theme of rejection. It could be anything. So there is an overriding theme that the author or the writer or the poet is trying to project. Number 2 is that all similarities that all genres of literature makes use of literal figurative expressions. You always find these writers use what we call literary devices to situate the work firmly within the framework of the discipline of literature, so that it reflects that particular genre. For example, a play may be tragedy or comedy or tragicomedy. You will see elements of literary devices that portray this. A prose may be fiction or non-fiction. A poem may be sonnet, dirge, or ode or epic. So all genres of literature make use of literary devices. Then we have the next one. All genres use peculiar language. Yes. In a prose work, you have the structure of sentences and paragraphs. In a drama, you have dialogues. You have dialogues arranged in acts and scenes. In poetry, you have what we call stanzas and verses. All of these are show what the peculiarity in their language use and affect how the language is being structured. Then the fourth one is that they all have basis in social realities. Literary writers always look at the predominant environment in which they exist to serve as an inspiration to write. So they are not just writing because they are jobless or no, they are trying to pass a message based on the realities around the environment in which they exist. Another similarity among the three genres of literature is that there is some level of fictionalization. Yes, there may be some inclusion of fiction or exaggeration or somewhat, but the key point is that the writer is trying to pass a message. Now, let's talk about prose writing for ND1 students. Now, a prose is a long written work of art with up to more than 150 pages. A prose is always written in paragraphs and sentences, like I said, and they are oftentimes put in separate chapters depending on the author's style of writing. Now, since the primary purpose of writing is communication, a novelist uses language through creativity and imagination to express himself or herself to target readers. So a prose writer is meant to tell a story, is a storyteller, which may be divided into plot and subplots. So the detailed stories portrayed by the writer may be, for instance, is an historical event or a recent incident. So prose writing is meant to express something that has happened in the past or something that is happening now. Now, prose can be classified into two, fiction and non-fiction. Now, the fiction on the one hand is the prose in which narrative elements are based on the creative imaginations of the writer rather than real life situations. I repeat, a fiction is that type of prose in which narrative elements are based on the creative imagination of the writer rather than real life situations. So that, I'm sure you have heard about Animal Farm. There is no place in the world that is Animal Farm. It's just a creative imagination of George Orwell, the writer, the novelist. So, but if you read that work, you will see elements of fictionalization, but there is a message that the writer is passing. So, fiction is something that is not real life. However, it is meant to teach a lesson. On the other hand, is non-fiction. Non-fiction is a real life experience presented in a narrative form. Non-fiction is a real life experience presented in a narrative form. So examples of non-fictions are biographies and autobiographies. Biographies are written by others about a particular person, by a group of writers about a particular person. The person could be a politician, it could be a millionaire or somewhat. That's biography. But autobiography is when I decide to write my own story, my own life experiences about myself, using my name, using I, me, using the first person pronouns. Then it becomes an autobiography. We have examples of autobiographies that are banned. For example, we have Obafemi Awolowo's My Early Life. We have Nnamdi Azikiwe's My Odyssey. We have Chinua Achebe's There Was a Country. We have Wole Soyinka's Years of Childhood. We also have Nelson Mandela's Long Walk to Freedom. Kenneth Kaunda's Zambia shall be free, and so on and so forth. All of these, we also have Gandhi's an autobiography, The Story of My Experiment with Truth, among others. Now, since fiction is based on imaginary situations, we have types of fiction: fables, parables, fairy tales, folklore, elements of fiction. Now, the chief function of fiction is just entertainment and fun making, but oftentimes it tends to instruct, warn, persuade, or incite readers. Now, there are three types of prose. We have short stories, novella, and novel. Of course, the short story is a small is a present a short story can present a complex plot through many interconnected chapters, several unique characters, changing roles at different times. While a novella is a work that is shorter in length than a novel, while a novel is oftentimes bigger in form. Now, what are the elements of a prose? Number one, there is what we call the narrative point of view. The narrative point of view is the particular perspective that from which the novelist expresses his or her creative imagination. The narrative point of view as a narrator. So you could adopt omniscient point of view, first person point of view, or third person point of view. That's number one element of prose writing. Number two element of prose writing is narrative style. Every narrator has a style of writing. So an author's style of writing is the person's face that distinguishes the person from other writers. So it's important that you take note of writer's style. That's the second one. The third narrative element of prose is setting. Every prose work is situated within a time frame and physical location. It could be a physical environment in which the marginal characters exist. It could be a marketplace, a foreign land, or a city. There must be a setting. A prose work setting can even also be at the beach, or a village, or a city, or a forest. Now, the plot structure is the pattern or sequential organization of the connected actions and events in a prose. So the prose writer uses the plot to tell the readers what happens, how they manifest, and the significance of the series of events. The last but not the least, conflict. This is the disagreement or clash existing among fictional characters in a prose work. The conflict may be physical, ethical, or emotional. Okay? Now, physical conflict occurs when the characters engage in physical combat or war. Then you have bloodshed, you have the use of weapons and bloodshed. You also have an ethical conflict where one particular character makes a decision that affects the lives of others, this resulting into a conflict. When people make certain decisions that affect the lives of others, when government take decisions that affect the lives of the people negatively, there may be no conflict, there may be no street protest, yet the people will not be happy with the government. Psychologically, the people disconnect themselves from whatever the government is doing. This is what is known as an ethical conflict. Then the conflict can be emotional. If the characters go through emotional trauma as individuals, there are certain things that happen to some of the characters that make them, for example, maybe somebody that you love so much, one of the characters loves so much, is betrayed by the person who has received the love for years. The person can go through trauma. So this is the way of what these are different manifestations of conflict in a prose writing. So the conflict may occur between two opposing characters, the rival and the larger community. It may be a character and the society within character's mind. It depends. Then number 6 is the theme. Number 6 element is the theme. The theme of every literary piece is a focused message intended by the writer from the outset. The theme serves writers' response to social, political, or economic conditions of their home countries. Some writers address the issues of cross-cultural conflicts, traditional system of social segregation as their own theme. Some people focus on social justice, equality, gender equality, freedom of expression, freedom of life, and the rest of them are being advocated by some creative authors. Then number 7, characterization. Characterization is an integral part of the storytelling process. You need characters to be able to represent and describe human figures who play vital roles in the plot structure of a prose. So sometimes the author may choose to describe the physical attributes, the motivations, the manners and personality of each character that contributes significantly to the development of the structure. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I'll be waiting for your questions, ladies and gentlemen.